At 0640, the steel test bearing rolled to the edge of Megan Holt's calibration cup and stopped exactly where it was supposed to. Then something enormous hit the folding screen outside Triage. The screen snapped sideways. A tray clattered. Someone shouted for the doors to close. Megan looked up from the micro-forceps balanced between her gloved fingers, just in time to see an ivory shape explode through the opening. The juvenile came low and fast. His shoulders were nearly level with Megan's waist. Ink-dark forelegs struck the polished floor hard enough to skid. Bronze quills stood along his back in a jagged line. His mouth was open, but the sound coming from him was not a roar. It was too high, too breathless, too scared. Contain him. Megan dropped the forceps. The Ishori cub was already on her. Every sensible part of her body wanted to jump aside. Instead, she turned. Not toward him, not away. Sideways. The cub's chest hit her hip. Megan caught only enough of his weight to redirect him, letting her knees fold instead of locking her arms around him. Her instrument rack struck the floor behind her. Metallic cases burst open. A morning's worth of precision work scattered across the corridor. Megan barely saw it. She went down on one knee with the cub sliding against her thigh, one open forearm braced across his shoulder without closing around him. Easy, hold him. I am not holding him. He'll bolt. Yes, Megan said, breathing hard. That appears to be the plan. A second Ishori juvenile came through the doorway. This one was broader through the face. His bronze quills flattened almost completely. He stopped several steps away, looked at his sibling, looked at Megan, and made a low clicking sound in his throat. Several triage attendants backed into the wall. Megan stayed where she was. The first cub trembled so hard that his shoulder thudded softly against her leg. There was no blood, no obvious injury, no limp. His eyes kept tracking the doorway behind him. Megan glanced at the damaged folding screen. Someone had tried to swing it shut as the Ishori family entered. The cub had not charged into Triage. He had been trying to get out. Open the exit, Megan said. Nobody moved. She looked up. Open it. A nurse near the wall stared at her. We have an uncontrolled Ishori juvenile in a clinical corridor. You have a frightened kid facing a closed door. That is not your determination to make. Fine. Make your determination with the door open. The second cub took one careful step forward. The first answered with another high, tight sound. Megan shifted her forearm away from his shoulder. His head lifted immediately. There. That was the choice. Not whether he trusted her. Whether she was going to trap him. Megan put both hands flat on the floor where he could see them. I'm getting out of your way. She eased backward. The cub did not lunge. He did not snap. He stayed exactly where he was, shaking. The second juvenile crossed the remaining distance and pressed shoulder to shoulder with him. The first cub's bronze quills began to lower. Not all at once. A few along the neck first. Then the line over the shoulders. Then the smaller ones down the spine. The corridor went quiet. Someone finally opened the external clearance door. Fresh station air moved through the gap. The frightened cub turned his face toward it. He could leave. He did not. Instead, he leaned sideways until part of his weight rested against his sibling. Megan sat back on her heel. That, she said quietly, looks less like a security emergency. A voice behind her answered. It is still a clinical one. The people blocking the corridor moved aside. Senior Surgeon Kaldus Niv stepped through them. He was not physically imposing by station standards. Tall, yes, and narrow through the shoulders, with the precise posture of someone who had spent most of his adult life working over bodies that could not afford a careless movement. His gray surgical coat was perfectly fastened. His hands were bare. His expression was not angry. That made him more intimidating. He looked at the cubs, then Megan, then the wreckage of her instrument rack. What happened? A nurse started speaking. Kaldus lifted a finger. She stopped. He looked at Megan instead. Megan pointed toward the twisted folding screen. Someone moved that while the family was entering, the smaller one panicked. Door closed. He tried to get through the nearest opening. You made physical contact with an uncleared juvenile patient. He made most of the contact. That is not a meaningful distinction. It seemed meaningful to him. Caldus's gaze moved to Megan's hands. Those instruments were cleared for surgical inventory. You contaminated a completed calibration batch. Yes, you also crossed into active triage response without clinical authority. I was standing in the corridor. You intervened. He was going to hit me either. They were still flat on the floor. The cub beside her had stopped shaking hard enough to rattle his teeth. Caldus looked at the scattered cases behind her way. Then you should have moved. Megan glanced at the cub. I did. Caldus's jaw tightened slightly. It was the first visible emotion he had shown. A taller HFY appeared beyond the open doorway. The adult moved with unnerving silence for something that large. Her coat was darker than the juvenile's, almost cream bronze along the shoulders, with black forelegs and a heavy ridge of flattened quills down her spine. Both cubs looked at her immediately. The second juvenile clicked. The frightened one answered. The adult HFY lowered herself. She did not rush them. She waited. The cub beside Megan pushed slowly to his feet. Megan moved neither hand. He took one step toward the adult, then another. The second juvenile followed. Halfway across the corridor, the frightened cub stopped and looked back at Megan. Not dramatically. Not like a revelation. Just a brief, measuring look. Then he went to his family. The adult touched her muzzle to the top of his head. Caldus watched the reunion. Your name, Megan Holt. Department, Precision Logistics. Specific function, Micro-tool balance. You are not attached to clinical care. No, you are not an HFY specialist. No, you are not licensed for juvenile handling. Definitely no. Caldus looked at the... Whatever he thought of Megan's interpretation, the immediate crisis had ended. He turned to her, dented instrument cases again. Then you are finished in triage. Megan blinked. Finished for today? Finished until access review. The nurse beside him looked surprised. Megan was not. She had worked around enough regulated systems to recognize the moment when a problem became paperwork. Caldus continued. You will return to logistics. Your access authorization will be restricted to the instrument corridor. Your contaminated batch will be logged against your section. You will not re-enter triage unless specifically requested by clinical staff. The frightened cub lifted his head from beneath the adult's jaw. Megan saw the movement. Caldus did too. For an odd second, neither human looked away from him, then Megan stood. Understood. Caldus's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Perhaps he had expected an argument. Megan bent and began collecting the cases she could salvage. One hinge was broken, 2 trays were warped. A cluster of microforceps had spilled directly into the traffic seam and would need complete reprocessing. The black ceramic calibration cup had survived. So had the small steel bearing inside it. Megan picked it up last. The bearing rolled once around the inner curve, stopped. She tucked the cup into her pocket. Behind her, Caldus resumed control of triage. Megan went back to work. By mid-morning, everyone in Precision Logistics knew she had been banned from triage. By lunch, they had developed competing versions of why. In one, Megan had wrestled an apex juvenile to the ground with her bare hands. In another, she had attempted unauthorized surgery. By the end of the shift, someone from sterilization asked whether it was true the HFY had tried to eat a blood pressure cuff. Megan did not bother correcting most of it. She had work. Her station was narrow and plain compared with triage. A passive isolation base occupied most of the bench. Above it sat the calibration surface, a matte slab suspended on vibration-damping supports. Magnification lenses folded from the wall. Tool cradles lined the rear rail. There was nothing remotely medical about the work, despite the fact that nearly every object Megan touched would eventually enter an operating room. Her responsibility ended before that happened. She measured balance, alignment, grip resistance. Tiny deviations that could become large problems inside someone else's hands. The ruined morning batch took the rest of the day to replace. Megan was halfway through the final tray when a shadow darkened the entrance to the alcove. She assumed it was someone from triage with more instruments. It was the adult HFY. The female stood outside the threshold. Both cubs were with her. Megan froze with a pair of microforceps suspended above the table. The adult touched one foreclaw to the corridor floor. "May we stand here?" Her translator rendered the words in a calm contralto. Megan glanced automatically toward the triage boundary line farther down the corridor. "You're not asking the person who has authority to answer that. I am asking whether we obstruct your work, that I can answer." Megan set the forceps down. "No. You're fine there." The adult inclined her head. "I am Yara Tesh, Megan Holt. I know." Megan almost smiled. "I was afraid of that." One of the cubs moved forward. Megan recognized the frightened one from the morning by a dark patch across one wrist. "Tavi," Yara said. The broader cub clicked. "Rumo?" "Hello, Tavi." "Hello, Rumo." Neither came closer. That was fine. Yara watched Megan work. "What is the small vessel?" Megan took the black ceramic cup from beside her lamp. "This." "Yes, calibration cup." Yara's ears angled forward. "For liquid?" "No." Megan tipped the cup. The little steel bearing rolled in a slow curve and settled against the low side. "I use the bearing to see if the work surface is moving when it shouldn't." Yara studied it. "You determine whether the table is steady." Among other things, Tavi came one step nearer. His quills were flat now. Megan put the cup back. She returned to her tools. Nobody spoke for a while. That seemed to suit the cubs. Eventually, Yara turned toward the main corridor. "We are leaving Glasmere," Megan nodded. "I hope the next visit is less exciting." Yara made a sound the translator did not interpret. It might have been amusement. She stepped away. Rumo followed her. Tavi followed Rumo. Megan lowered her eyes to the forceps. A soft tap sounded beside the bench. She looked down. Tavi had returned. He stood just outside the alcove with one broad forepaw placed beside the edge of Megan's calibration surface support. He was not touching her. He was not blocking the exit. He simply stood there. Rumo came back as well. The broader cub pressed his shoulder lightly against Tavi's. The two juveniles watched Megan's hands. Megan looked toward Yara. The adult Ishori had stopped several paces away. She did not call them. She did not gesture. She waited. Megan picked up the forceps. The bearing in the black cup remained still. "So," Megan murmured, "apparently we're doing quality control together now." Tavi's ears twitched. Rumo clicked once. After a little while, they turned and left with Yara. Megan watched them disappear around the corridor. Only then did she notice Kaldus standing near the far triage door. He had seen the entire thing. He said nothing. Megan decided she preferred that. The Eshori family returned to Glasmere before Megan's access review was completed. This time there was no emergency. Yara had business with transit medicine. Tavi and Rumo accompanied her through the clearance wing and, on the way out, diverted toward precision logistics as if the detour had always been part of their route. Megan did not encourage them. She did not discourage them either. She kept working. Rumo discovered the rolling chair. He disliked it immediately. The first time Megan shifted her weight and the chair moved backward, Rumo jumped sideways, stared at it, and then approached with exaggerated caution. The next time she moved, he planted one paw against the chair wheel. Megan looked down. Helpful. Rumo kept his paw there. "I was planning to move," the paw remained. "You're very committed to this." Tavi watched from the doorway. Yara stood beyond them, speaking with a transit clerk. Rumo finally released the wheel. Megan moved the chair. He followed it with suspicious concentration. The third time the family visited, Tavi discovered the calibration cup. Megan had placed it too near the corner. He leaned in. His nose hovered above the rim. The steel bearing rolled slightly from his breath. Megan looked up. "Tavi." The cub looked at her. "That is the entire point of that thing." Tavi's ears flicked. "If you knock it over, I have to pretend I'm not annoyed because your mother is standing there." Yara, without turning, said, "You may be annoyed. Thank you." Tavi lowered his nose again. Megan put one finger against the cup. "Not yours." Tavi looked at her finger. Then the cup. Then Megan. He slowly drew his head back. Rumo immediately tried to inspect it. Tavi bumped him away. Megan stared. Yara finally turned. "Did he just protect my calibration cup?" Tavi protects rules he has personally discovered. That sounds exhausting. He is young. That does not contradict me. The translator captured Yara's tone perfectly. Megan laughed. The visits never became scheduled. That was what made them easy. Some days the family passed through another section of Glassmere and Megan never saw them. Other days Tavi and Rumo appeared at her doorway, watched for a few minutes, then left. They did not ask for food. They did not sleep beneath the table. They did not howl when Megan stepped away. They had a family, a home, a life that did not require Megan Holt to exist. They had simply decided that when they were at Glassmere, her alcove belonged on the list of places worth checking. Megan liked that more than she would have admitted. Her access review did not restore triage privileges. Caldus kept the restriction in place. The written explanation was polite. It praised Megan's good intentions, confirmed that the juvenile had not been injured, and noted that uncontrolled civilian intervention could create confusion during a future event. Megan read it once, then she filed it. Her supervisor, who disliked paperwork almost as much as she disliked replacing expensive instrument batches, stared at the access notice. "You want me to challenge this?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes. You did keep an Ishori juvenile from breaking its face on a doorway. He kept his own face from breaking. I mostly provided a less unpleasant surface." Her supervisor frowned. "Do you always talk like this when you're annoyed?" "I talk less when I'm annoyed?" "That's inconvenient." Megan went back to work. The first time Perrin Leth came to collect instruments, Megan almost forgot him before he left. He was younger than most of Caldus's surgical staff, though not young enough to be mistaken for a student. His apprentice mantle was reinforced along the shoulders and sides. A narrow lifting yoke ran beneath the fabric across the upper back, part of a safety system used during long procedures and training simulations. He presented his authorization. Megan checked it, then she handed him a sealed instrument case. "Balance verification is attached." "Thank you." He took the case. His right hand trembled once, very slightly. Megan noticed because noticing tiny movements was her job. Perrin noticed her noticing. His fingers tightened. The tremor stopped. Megan looked back at her terminal. "Anything else?" "No." He left. On his next visit, his hands were steady. On the visit after that, they were not. He put both palms against the edge of the counter while Megan verified the case code. She said nothing. Perrin watched her hands instead. "You work without active stabilization?" Megan looked at the suspended table. "The table is stabilized, your hands are not. My hands are attached to me. I found removing them inconvenient." Perrin smiled before he could stop himself. Then the smile vanished. "I meant a powered brace. I know. You never use one? Sometimes?" "Depends on the instrument." Perrin nodded. His fingers trembled against the counter. He pressed them harder. Megan closed the case. The tremor worsened. She slid the case toward him. Perrin reached for it. His hand shook again. He withdrew it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Megan said, "You want the case left here?" His eyes lifted. "No." "All right." He took it with both hands. The shaking continued until he was halfway down the corridor. Megan did not call after him. She was not a clinician. She was not his supervisor. She was not going to turn noticing into permission. Tavi and Rumo arrived shortly afterward with Yara. Rumo went directly to the rolling chair. Tavi checked the cup. Megan had begun placing it slightly farther from the edge. Tavi noticed that too. He looked at the new position, then at Megan. "Yes," she said, "that is because of you." His bronze quills lifted in a tiny ripple. Yara settled near the doorway. "He appears pleased. He shouldn't be. You changed the environment because of him. I moved a cup to Tavi. These facts are not unrelated." Megan glanced at the cub. He was now sitting beside the calibration support, watching the cup as if it contained classified information. Do Ishori juveniles always memorize things like this? Not memorize. Yara chose the word carefully. They include what? Patterns, people, places, responses. Megan raised an eyebrow. That sounds like memorizing with extra steps. Yara's ears angled back. No. Memory asks what happened. Inclusion asks what belongs with what. Megan considered that. Rumo nudged the chair. It rolled, he looked offended. What have they included me with? Yara watched Tavi watching Megan's hands. Safety without possession. Megan's fingers stopped. Yara continued, Our young are physically strong before they understand how easily strength frightens others. Many species respond by increasing control, restraints, commands, distance. That sounds familiar. You did the opposite. I got knocked over. You gave Tavi the exit before you asked anything of him. I didn't ask anything of him. Yara looked at her. Yes. Megan had no answer to that. Yara glanced toward the corridor. Humans form bonds strangely. I've heard worse reviews. You extend protection before membership is established. That sounds like a very formal way of saying we pick up things that are crying. It is. Megan smiled. Yara's gaze shifted toward Tavi and Rumo. They do not think you are family. The words were so direct that Megan almost laughed. I wasn't under that impression. They think you are someone family may safely include. That landed differently. Megan looked at the cubs. Tavi had stretched one paw toward the calibration cup. He stopped before touching it. Rumo rested his chin on Tavi's shoulder. Neither looked at Megan. The moment did not need anything from her, so she returned to work. Perrin kept appearing for instrument pickup. At first Megan thought his tremor was random, then she realized it had a pattern. It was worst when Caldus was nearby. Not because Caldus shouted, he did not. Not because he humiliated Perrin, he never raised his voice in public. Caldus was harder than that. He watched. He corrected. He expected repetition until variation disappeared. Perrin's hands might be steady when he entered precision logistics alone. If Caldus accompanied him, the fingers tightened first, then the wrist. Then the tiny lateral movement Megan could see before anyone else would have cared. One afternoon Caldus came to collect a specialty tray himself. Perrin stood beside him. Megan placed the sealed case on the counter. Caldus looked at the verification tag. Resistance values? Within instrument specification. Symmetry. Within instrument specification. Were the grips checked under active damping? No, Caldus looked up. Why? They didn't require it. I prefer it. The manufacturer doesn't. I am the surgeon using them, and I'm the technician certifying them. Silence. Perrin looked at the floor. Caldus's expression remained controlled. Your confidence survived the access restriction. My job survived it. Caldus slid the case toward Perrin. Take it. Perrin reached, his fingers trembled. The case shifted against the counter. Caldus's eyes went immediately to his hand. Reset. Perrin pulled his hand back. His shoulders rose. Again. Perrin reached. The tremor sharpened. The edge of the case clicked against his thumbnail. Reset. Megan watched his jaw clench. Caldus did not sound cruel. That was the problem. He sounded reasonable, patient. Certain that repetition would eventually produce the correct result. Perrin reached again. His hand shook harder. Megan looked at Caldus. You want me to leave the case here? Caldus's attention snapped to her. No, I was asking him. Perrin went still. Caldus's face cooled. Megan, she waited. You are not involved in this. I know. Then remain uninvolved. Megan looked at Perrin. He was staring at the sealed case. She stepped back from the counter. Perrin closed both hands around it. The tremor continued. He carried the case away. Caldus followed. Megan did not see Perrin again that day. The next time Tavi and Rumo came through Glasmere, Megan noticed they were watching the surgical corridor more than usual. Rumo stood at the alcove entrance. Tavi stayed near the bench. A training alarm pulsed faintly somewhere behind the wall. Megan kept working. Tavi's quills lifted, not in panic, attention. The alarm stopped. A few moments later, Perrin passed the entrance carrying an empty instrument frame. His hands were shaking. He saw Megan. His pace changed. Barely. Then he saw the cubs. Tavi stepped toward him. Perrin stopped. Rumo left the doorway and came to Tavi's side. Megan felt Yara straighten behind them. Tavi, she said quietly. The cub ignored her. Perrin looked from one juvenile to the other. Are they supposed to do that? Megan kept her hands away from the situation. Do what? Stand there, you're asking the wrong human. Perrin gave a strained laugh. His grip tightened around the empty frame. The shaking worsened. Tavi's ears moved forward. Rumo looked at Perrin's hands. Then both cubs looked at Megan. Megan did nothing. After several seconds, Perrin placed the frame on the floor. His hands eased, not completely enough. Tavi lowered his quills. Rumo sat. Perrin stared at them. They were waiting for that. Yara answered from behind Megan. They were waiting for you to stop fighting the object. Perrin looked at the empty frame. I wasn't fighting it. Yara tilted her head. The translator said nothing because Yara had not spoken, but the expression needed no help. Perrin exhaled. All right, maybe I was. Kaldis appeared at the far end of the corridor. The cubs saw him. Perrin saw him. His hands tightened again. Kaldis stopped. He looked at Tavi. At Rumo, at the frame on the floor, then at Megan. You were instructed not to interact with clinical training. I am calibrating forceps. Why are the juveniles here? You'd have to ask them. Why is my apprentice here? Perrin answered. I was walking past. Kaldis's gaze went to his hands. Your control is deteriorating. Perrin's face changed. Megan saw humiliation arrive before he could hide it. Kaldis stepped closer. We will increase stabilization intervals. Perrin nodded. Tavi's quills rose again. Megan looked at the cub. Easy. It was the first time she had spoken directly to either juvenile during one of Perrin's episodes. Tavi turned his head toward her. His quills lowered. Kaldis noticed. Of course he did. His entire profession was built around noticing changes. That, he said, is exactly the concern. Megan frowned. What is? They respond to you. Yes, they respond to him. Perrin looked uncomfortable. Yara's ears flattened. Kaldis continued. Behavioral transfer from an unauthorized contact can compromise clinical interpretation. Megan stared at him. Behavioral transfer. The juveniles have learned a response pattern around this area. They just did it before they got here. Kaldis looked at her. Megan pointed down the corridor. They met Perrin halfway from your practice lane. Perrin swallowed. She's right. Kaldis looked at him. Perrin continued anyway. They came to me. She wasn't there. The corridor seemed to narrow around them. Kaldis looked at the cubs. Rumo had lowered himself beside the instrument frame. Tavi stood facing Perrin. Neither juvenile was looking at Megan now. Kaldis's expression remained unreadable. Then he said, We will review it formally. Yara stepped forward. Review what? Whether the juveniles are responding to clinical instability, environmental association, or reinforced behavior connected to civilian contact. They have received no reinforcement from Megan. Repeated access can itself reinforce. Yara's voice dropped. They have a family, I am aware. They are not a program you contaminated. Kaldis paused. Megan had never seen him look uncertain before. Only for a second, then the uncertainty vanished behind procedure. The review will be non-invasive. Yara's black foreclaws flexed against the floor. Megan spoke before the conversation hardened. Will the cubs be restrained? No. Lured? No. Yara looked at Megan. Megan shrugged slightly. If he's going to be procedural, we might as well make the procedure useful. Kaldis ignored the remark. My apprentice also has a competency demonstration scheduled. The observations can occur during the same period. Perrin's face went pale. Megan looked at him. Kaldis continued. Megan will not participate. There it was, the real pressure. Not punishment, removal, a clean line drawn around the person whose response had created the behavior everyone now wanted to measure. Megan folded her arms. Fine. Perrin looked at her. Something in his expression suggested that was not the answer he wanted. She could not give him another one. The days before the review were strangely ordinary. That made them worse. Megan calibrated tools. Perrin collected some of them. Tavi and Rumo visited with Yara. Kaldis did not return to the alcove. The station continued around them as if nothing important were building. Megan preferred emergencies. At least emergencies admitted what they were. Perrin came alone the evening before the demonstration. He stood outside Megan's work area without entering. She was checking a set of microcutters. You're finished late, so are you? I'm always finished late. He looked at the calibration table. Can I ask you something? You can ask, you might not answer. I'm developing healthy professional boundaries. He almost smiled. Then he held out his hands. They were steady. Mostly. Caldus thinks I can train this out. Megan set the cutter down. I don't know if he's right. That isn't what I asked. You haven't asked anything yet. Perrin looked annoyed. Good. Annoyed was better than ashamed. He tried again. When you saw it the first time, what did you think? Megan considered the question carefully. That you were trying too hard not to shake. His hands moved. A small tremor. He immediately tightened them. Megan pointed. That Perrin released his fingers. What? You do something the moment you notice it. I stop it. No, you try to stop it. His jaw tightened. That distinction matters to a tool technician. It matters to anyone watching motion. Perrin stared at the calibration surface. Megan took the black cup and placed it near the center. She tipped it. The steel bearing rolled, curved around the bottom, settled. This table isn't motionless. Perrin looked up. It's a stabilized surface. Yes, that means it's motionless. No, it means its movement stays inside a range that lets me work. Perrin looked at the bearing. Megan stepped away from the table. Your problem might be completely different. I'm not telling you what your body is doing. I'm telling you what I can see. He nodded slowly. Caldus says visible tremor means the instrument path is unreliable. He knows surgery. I don't. But? No, but Perrin frowned. Megan pointed at the cup. I'm not trying to win an argument with him. I'm explaining my table. Perrin laughed quietly. That may be the most annoying answer you could have given me. I work very hard. He looked toward the corridor. Tavi and Rumo seem to understand you. They understand that I moved a cup because Tavi nearly knocked it over. You know what I mean? Yes. Perrin's hands shook again. This time he did not immediately close them. The movement lasted, then eased. Megan noticed. Perrin noticed her noticing. He looked down. That was less. Yes. Why? No idea. He stared at her. She spread her hands. Healthy professional boundaries. He laughed again. The sound carried down the empty corridor. Perrin left with steadier hands than when he arrived. The review began without Megan. That was the official plan. Precision logistics remained open, but the boundary to triage was marked restricted on Megan's badge. She could hear the practice lane through the wall. Not every sound enough. The low pulse of simulation equipment. The soft announcement tones used during clinical drills. The occasional mechanical click of a powered stabilization frame adjusting position. Megan knew the device by function even if she had never worked on one. It did what Caldus wanted people to do. Corrected deviation. Kept a limb inside a desired path. Reduced unexpected movement. She tried not to think about Perrin wearing it. A sealed tray arrived from sterilization. Megan opened the outer case, checked the instrument list, began working. The bearing sat in its black cup near the rear of the table. Still, for a while, nothing happened. Then someone shouted in the practice lane, "Not fear." Instruction. Another voice answered, "Perrin." Megan could not make out the words. The stabilization system clicked faster. Then stopped. Silence. Megan's hands froze above the table. A warning tone sounded. One long pulse, then another. The corridor outside Precision Logistics filled with footsteps. Megan stayed where she was. Her badge still barred triage. A staff member ran past the alcove entrance. Then Yara. Tavi and Rumo were with her. The cubs stopped so abruptly their claws scraped the floor. Yara continued another step before realizing they were no longer beside her. Tavi, he was staring toward triage. Rumo's bronze quills had lifted. Yara turned. The restricted doors opened. Perrin emerged, not walking normally. He was upright, but the stabilization frame around his forearms and shoulders had locked rigid. The reinforced apprentice mantle bore part of the device's weight. Caldus walked beside him. "Do not fight the brace." "I'm not. You are countering it. I'm trying to stand." "Then stop compensating." Perrin's hands shook violently inside the frame. Megan saw the pattern from across the corridor. He was doing exactly what he always did. Trying to force himself into stillness. The device corrected him. He corrected against it. The device corrected harder. Perrin's entire upper body had entered the argument. Caldus reached for the control panel at Perrin's wrist. "Tavi," Yara warned. Too late. The cub moved. Not at Caldus. Not toward Megan. Toward Perrin. Rumo followed. Clinical staff backed away instinctively. Perrin saw the juveniles coming. His eyes widened. "Caldus, remain still. I am attempting that." Tavi stopped at Perrin's left side. Rumo took the right. The cubs looked up at him. Perrin's arms trembled inside the locked frame. Tavi lowered his head. His muzzle slipped under the reinforced lifting yoke built into Perrin's mantle. Rumo mirrored him on the other side. For a heartbeat, nobody understood. Megan did. "They're taking his weight?" Caldus turned toward her. "You are outside the clinical boundary. So are they." Tavi lifted. Rumo lifted with him. Perrin gasped as part of his weight came off his locked stance. His knees bent slightly. The cubs adjusted, not dragging him. Not biting fabric, not pulling his sleeves. They were using the yoke exactly as it had been designed to be used by emergency staff, except nobody had shown them that. Caldus stepped forward. Yara blocked him with one foreleg, not violently, simply present. "Wait. My apprentice is inside a stabilization lock. He is conscious. He requires clinical support." Yara looked at the cubs. They appeared to agree. Tavi took a step. Rumo matched him. Perrin moved between them. The juveniles carried enough of his weight that his legs no longer had to fight the rigid frame. They turned away from Triage. Caldus stared. Megan's stomach tightened. She knew where they were going. Perrin realized a moment later. His face changed. Tavi, the cub, kept moving. Rumo's shoulder pressed carefully beneath the opposite side of the yoke. Caldus followed. So did the clinical staff. Yara walked behind the cubs. The procession crossed the corridor, past the boundary line, past the sterilization junction, past the instrument return cabinet. Straight toward precision logistics. Toward Megan. Nobody spoke. Tavi stopped at her table. Rumo stopped beside him. Perrin stood between them, suspended enough to breathe, his hands still shaking inside the locked brace. Megan looked at Caldus. Caldus looked at her. For the first time since she had met him, he had no instruction ready. Megan cleared the calibration surface, not the instruments one by one. She swept the sealed cases safely onto the side cradle and moved the black cup to the rear rail. Then she stepped back. "Perrin," he looked at her. "Do you want the table?" His breathing was fast. "Yes." "Then use it." Caldus moved forward. The stabilization frame must be released first. Perrin flinched. The tremor worsened. Tavi's quills rose. Megan held up one hand. "Caldus." The surgeon stopped. Megan nodded toward Perrin. "Ask him?" Caldus stared at her. "You are not directing clinical care. I'm directing traffic around my table." Perrin made a sound that might have been a laugh if he had not been so exhausted. Caldus looked at him. "Do you want the brace released?" "Yes." That answer came immediately. Caldus touched the emergency control. The frame unlocked. Perrin's arms dropped. The tremor became visibly worse. Several staff members inhaled. Perrin instinctively pulled his hands toward his chest. Megan saw his fingers begin to close. "Table's right there." He looked at her, then placed both forearms on the passive calibration surface. Not flat, not symmetrical, where he chose, his left elbow farther forward, right wrist angled slightly outward. His shoulders dropped. The table absorbed the movement he could not remove. The shaking did not disappear. It changed. From whole arm struggle to a smaller motion in his hands, Perrin closed his eyes. Tavi stepped away. Rumo stepped away with him. They did not crowd Perrin. They had delivered him. That was all. Megan stood across the table. "Better?" Perrin opened his eyes. "Yes." Caldus watched his hands. The surgeon's face had gone very still. Perrin looked at him. "I can feel my fingers again." Caldus stepped closer. "Any weakness?" "No." "Pain? No. Loss of sensation?" "No." Caldus looked at the released stabilization frame, then at Perrin's forearms resting naturally on Megan's work surface. Can you lift your right hand? Perrin did. It trembled, but he lifted it. Left? He lifted the other. Caldus's gaze narrowed. The tremor was present in both. Functional, visible, unhidden. Perrin lowered his hands. Megan looked toward the cubs. Tavi stood beside Yara now. Rumo sat. Both watched Perrin. Neither watched Megan. That mattered. Yara seemed to understand it before anyone else. She looked at Caldus. They did not bring him to Megan. Caldus frowned. They quite clearly did. No! Yara's translator softened her voice but could not soften the meaning. They brought him to what she did. Silence settled across the alcove. Caldus's eyes moved from Yara to Megan. Megan felt suddenly uncomfortable. I didn't teach them anything. Yara looked at her. You showed them. That is not the same. To a juvenile, it often is. Caldus turned toward Tavi and Rumo. They recognized destabilization. Yara's ears angled forward. They recognized struggle. Those are not equivalent. No? Yara looked at Perrin. That is why your interpretation failed. Caldus's jaw tightened. The staff behind him went silent. Megan almost stepped in, then stopped herself. This was not her argument. Perrin made it anyway. When my hands move, I brace against them. Caldus looked at him. Perrin continued. You tell me to correct. Yes, so I correct. You must maintain a predictable instrument path. I know. His hands trembled against the table. But when I start shaking, I stop thinking about the instrument path. I think about not shaking. Caldus said nothing. Perrin swallowed. The brace thinks the same way. Megan looked at the steel bearing in the black cup behind him. It remained still. Caldus noticed her glance. His eyes followed. What is that? Megan almost laughed. You have walked past it for months. I have never asked. Calibration bearing. For the surface? Yes. Caldus looked at the table. It measures whether the table is still. No, his gaze snapped to Megan. She knew she had him now, though she had not meant to. It tells me whether the table's movement is inside a range that lets me do precision work. Caldus looked back at Perrin. Megan continued before he could turn the sentence into more than it was. That's about the table. Not him. I understand. I'm serious. So am I. Caldus walked around the side of the bench. Perrin did not move away. The surgeon watched his hands, not the tremor, the way Perrin positioned himself, the angle of his wrist, the amount of pressure he put through his forearms, the places where his fingers compensated rather than fought. Caldus had probably watched those hands thousands of times. Megan wondered when he had last watched them without already knowing what he wanted to see. Tavi made a low click. Caldus looked at him. The cub lowered himself to the floor. Rumo did the same. Neither juvenile looked distressed. They had solved their problem. The adults were simply late. The formal review happened later that day because formal reviews always happened after everyone involved already understood the interesting part. Megan attended because Caldus requested her presence. That alone caused enough gossip to keep Precision Logistics entertained for weeks. The review room was plain. No raised dais, no tribunal, no packed gallery. Yara sat beside the cubs. Perrin sat across from Caldus. Megan took the chair nearest the door. Did you provide medical treatment to Tavi during the original triage event? No. Did you diagnose panic? No. You used that word in your incident statement? I described what I thought I was seeing. Did you restrain him? No. Feed him? No. Reward? A station clinical assessor led the discussion. She began with Megan. Him? No. Train him? No. Request repeated access? No. The assessor turned to Yara. Did your family intentionally reinforce juvenile return to Megan Holt? No. Did Megan solicit a familial role? No. Did the juveniles show distress when prevented from seeing her? No. Do they show normal attachment to their biological family? Yara's ears angled back. The assessor amended quickly. I withdraw the phrasing. Good. The assessor looked at Perrin. Were you injured during today's incident? No. Did the juveniles bite, drag, or force you? No. Could you have refused their support? Perrin thought about it. Yes. Why didn't you? Because it helped. Did Megan tell them to approach you? No. Was Megan present when they first displayed similar behavior toward you before today? No. That answer changed the room, not dramatically. No one gasped, but Caldus lowered his eyes. The location conditioning explanation was finished. The assessor looked at him. Surgeon Niv? Caldus sat with both hands folded. I treated visible reduction in tremor as the immediate performance objective. Perrin watched him. Caldus continued. That approach produced temporary improvement during controlled practice. Temporary, the assessor asked. Yes. Did you have evidence of worsening under higher observation load? Caldus paused. Yes. Did you alter the method? I increased stabilization. Perrin looked down. Caldus's voice became quieter. I interpreted increased movement as insufficient control. The assessor glanced at Megan. Megan looked back. She had nothing to add. The assessor asked Caldus, and now? Caldus did not answer immediately. He looked at Perrin. When the brace locked, his tremor was greater than at baseline. Yes. When the frame was removed, the amplitude initially increased. Yes. When he selected support position himself, the tremor remained visible but his hand function improved. The assessor nodded. Caldus looked at Tavi and Rumo. The juveniles responded before any diagnostic instruction. Yara said yes. They responded to Perrin away from Megan's work area previously. Yes, Caldus breathed out slowly. Then I was wrong about the behavior. The sentence was so simple that Megan almost missed how difficult it must have been for him. The assessor did not rescue him from it. Which behavior? Caldus looked at Megan. Both. The assessor waited. Caldus continued. I interpreted Megan's initial response as uncontrolled civilian interference because it did not follow clinical procedure. I interpreted the juvenile's later behavior as attachment contamination because it originated outside clinical instruction. He looked at Perrin, and I interpreted visible stillness as the same thing as usable control. Perrin's hands trembled once in his lap. He did not hide them. Caldus noticed. This time he said nothing. The review did not turn Megan into a hero. She would have hated that. It did not make her a healer. She would have refused that. The written correction was narrower and more useful. Non-clinical stabilization support could be allowed when a conscious person selected it and when no medical procedure was being performed. Visible movement alone could not be used as the sole measure of apprentice instrument readiness. Juvenile affiliative behavior toward staff could not automatically be classified as conditioning simply because it reduced distress. And no civilian worker could be assigned clinical responsibility merely because a patient or juvenile trusted them. Megan liked that last part most. Caldus's authority to evaluate Perrin alone was transferred into a shared review structure. He remained a surgeon. Perrin remained his apprentice. Neither outcome satisfied the people in logistics who had wanted a dramatic downfall. Megan told them to find a worse hobby. A few days after the review, Caldus came to the calibration alcove alone. Megan was balancing a fine instrument set. She saw him, kept working. He waited until she finished the measurement. That is an improvement, she said. What is? You waited. I have always waited. No, Caldus considered objecting, decided not to. Megan placed the instrument in its cradle. What do you need? I came to return your triage access. She looked at him. You can do that. It was my restriction. Then apparently you can. He held out a badge, update authorization. Megan did not take it. Caldus looked at her. You do not want access restored? Do I need it? No. Then why? He was quiet. Megan leaned back. You're trying to apologize with permissions. Caldus's expression hardened slightly. I am correcting an unnecessary restriction. That is a very surgeon way to say yes. He lowered the badge authorization. I misjudged your actions. Megan nodded. You did. I also misjudged the juveniles. Yes. And Perrin, Megan stopped smiling. That one matters, I know. For several seconds, the only sound was the station ventilation. Then Caldus asked, why did you not tell me what you saw sooner? Megan looked at him. I did. You never described Perrin's tremor. That wasn't mine to describe. You observed it. Yes, you had an interpretation. Yes, and you withheld it. Megan folded her arms. You ordered me to remain uninvolved. Caldas stared at her. The silence lasted long enough to become mildly uncomfortable. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a small sound, almost offended. Megan grinned. Good. That was bothering me. What? I wasn't sure you could. His expression returned to neutral, but not quickly enough. He placed the badge authorization on the counter. You may decide whether you want it. Megan glanced at the document. Fine. Caldas turned to leave. Caldas. He stopped. Perrin doesn't need you to stop caring whether his hands work. The surgeon looked back. I know. He might need you to care about something before stillness. Caldas's eyes moved toward the calibration table. Functional range. Megan shrugged. Your words, not mine. He left the authorization on the counter. Megan restored her access the next morning. Mostly because sometimes sterilization forgot to bring tools all the way to her. Life resumed with disappointing speed. That was how Megan knew the correction was real. Nobody built a monument. Nobody gave her a title. Nobody renamed the corridor. The Ashori family kept traveling. Yara kept bringing Tavi and Rumo through Glasmere when their route required it. Sometimes the cubs visited Megan. Sometimes they did not. Perrin's training changed gradually. He still shook. Not every day, not always visibly. When he did, he stopped treating the first tremor like an alarm. His new evaluators measured what he could actually do. Caldas adapted more slowly. Megan could tell because he began appearing in precision logistics, with increasingly specific questions about instrument behavior under imperfect grip conditions. He never admitted those questions were connected to Perrin. Megan never forced him to. One afternoon, Perrin arrived with an instrument case tucked under one arm. Tavi and Rumo were already in the alcove. Rumo had stretched along the floor beside the lower bench brace. Tavi sat near Megan's right side watching the calibration cup. Perrin stopped. I see they still supervise you. They have concerns about my standards. Tavi's ears twitched. Perrin placed the case on the counter. His hand shook once. He did not hide it. Tavi saw. The cub looked at Perrin. Then at the table, Perrin laughed. No, Tavi tilted his head. I'm fine. The cub stayed where he was. Perrin set the case down himself. Megan checked the authorization. Yara waited in the corridor. Perrin looked toward her. Do they do that with everyone now? Yara answered. No, just me. No, Perrin frowned. Megan smiled. He wanted to feel special. Yara's ears angled in amusement. They include those who respond correctly. Perrin looked at Megan. What does that mean? It means apparently there's an exam. Did you pass? I got banned from triage. Perrin laughed. Even Caldas, approaching from the surgical corridor, heard that one. He stopped at the alcove entrance. Tavi noticed him. For a moment, Megan wondered whether the old tension would return. It did not. Caldas looked at Perrin's hands. There was a tremor. Small, visible. Caldas looked at the sealed case. Ready? Perrin nodded. Yes, no reset, no correction, no order to stop, just the question. Perrin picked up the case. His hand shook. The case remained secure. Caldas nodded once. They left together. Tavi watched them go. Then he looked at Megan. Well, she said, that only took everyone involved making it unnecessarily difficult. Yara stepped closer. You include difficulty in everything. That is unfair. You are human. That is species profiling. It is observation. Megan pointed at her. I was thrown out of triage for less. Yara's translator rendered the Ashori's laugh as a low musical vibration. Rumo rolled onto his side. Tavi returned his attention to the calibration cup. The family eventually moved farther along their trade route. Their visits became less frequent. Then regular again when Yara's work brought them through Glasmere during the next season. Tavi grew broader. Rumo's bronze quills darkened at the tips. Neither became easier to fit into Megan's narrow alcove. They remained careful anyway. That was the part Megan never stopped finding funny. An Ishori juvenile could lean into a reinforced station hatch and make the frame complain. Tavi could drag a cargo cushion across the corridor without effort. Rumo once moved Megan's rolling chair while she was sitting in it because he wanted access to the wall vent behind her. Yet both of them treated the tiny black calibration cup like a sacred object. Megan had never taught them to, not formally. She had simply cared whether it moved. One quiet afternoon, Yara was speaking with station transit staff outside the alcove while Rumo rested along the lower bench support. Tavi stood beside Megan. She was halfway through a delicate balance check. The steel bearing sat in the black cup near the rear of the table. Tavi shifted. One enormous dew claw moved toward the cup. Megan did not look up. "Don't you dare." The paw stopped. Megan adjusted the microforceps. Tavi looked at the cup, then at her. His paw lowered with absurd care, not touching the ceramic, not touching the table, just resting beside it. Megan continued the balance check. Rumo slept against the lower brace. Yara's voice drifted softly from the corridor. The steel bearing remained motionless in its black cup beside Tavi's broad, carefully placed dew claw.